Hey guys, this is going to be a little bit of a different type of video, although not really, because this channel is kind of like a conglomerate of like personal development, spiritual development, as well as like my own personal interest in creativity, whether that's like through poetry, music, things like that. But as you can tell from the title of this video, this is something I mentioned a few times, me going to law school, but because it's almost August and school begins pretty soon. I think most law schools start like in the beginning of early August or middle of August. And I wanted to share this video for anyone who may be considering higher education, who's still sort of like on the fence about that particular path, or someone who is, already who's committed to go, but they're still not 100% sure whether or not it's for them, and they still have time to, go or not go based on whatever they're feeling. So I'm going to speak from my perspective on law school because that's the path I chose. But I think this can apply for any sort of education, whether that's like, do I want to go to college? Do I want to go to medical school? Any type of higher education, I think. So before I begin, I guess to share a little bit about my background and what kind of led me down that path of deciding to go to law school. I've been a really creative person ever since I can remember. I've always loved to express myself through making videos. Back in the day, like in the 90s, we had something called Windows Movie Maker, and I would make like promotional videos of me and my tennis buddies playing tennis, ping pong, and making various like music videos with like anime. I say that just because I'm a very creative person, and I knew I wanted to pursue something creative in my life. But at the same time, both of my parents are medical doctors. And so I kind of grew up with this idea of a professional career is like the only career because that's what I knew. I like my parents' lifestyle. I feel extremely blessed to have them as my parents. I wanted to maintain that. I wanted that sort of, that thing that they had. And so growing up, I've been, I guess, I don't really consider myself this, but a lot of people have told me I'm very good at being very analytical, seeing both sides of the coin very clearly, playing devil's advocate, so to speak. And so, I wasn't really sure if I wanted to go into medicine or science. And so my friends and family, like, you should go to law school since you like to debate people and argue. So what I'm trying to say here is that my initial introduction or interest in law was introduced to me by friends and family saying that I might be good at this particular route. And it was the only route that I was really given, or complimented by. People were like every other sort of, and no one had ever told me any other path I could pursue. Because at that time, the only thing on my mind was pursuing tennis professionally. And then when I turned 15 or 16, I realized that path wasn't really for me. And so I kind of fell back on the law school type of thing. In high school, I joined a lot of like political groups. And I was, in the 2008 election, that was my very first election to vote. And growing up in a very fundamental Christian high school and being the only person of color in my class, it was interesting that I think there were like maybe 3 people in my class who were openly supportive of Obama at that time. And so that got me really interested in understanding people where they're coming from, because their own points of view, and trying to convey my own point of view to them, and try to convince them that I was right in my thinking and that they may not have been so right in their thinking. And so Like, okay, it's great. I like doing this in person, so maybe I could still pursue this law school thing. And so that was probably the extent of my interest in law, right? Was that political election. Because outside of that, the only thing I found interesting in law was like Law and Order SVU, which is like a very romanticized version of law. And I kind of pushed everything else aside of my interest because I kind of made law school a goal. And one of the things I wish I would have done, and I'll touch on this a little bit later when I was in college, was that I really should have intern places, work places during the summertime to see if law was something I actually enjoyed doing or could see myself doing. A lot of people my age at that time, they had summer jobs. I did a few gigs here and there, volunteering at my local tennis club, things like that. But I never really pursued investigating law, interning for like a judge or a lawyer, or even speaking with them and asking questions like, what is law really about? Until I was in law school, which is a terrible thing to do. Turn this light's really bright. So I graduated high school and with the intention of going to law school, and I majored in political economy. It's funny because when you check in at my college, they ask you like what major you want to major in. And I asked them, it's like, well, what major do lawyers major in? And they're like, usually like political science or economics or business or things like that, or history. And so I said, great, political economy sort of sounds like political science. They didn't have political science at my college, so I majored in political economy. And I should have known this from the very beginning because all the classes that were related to law, I loved history, still love history. But all the classes that were related to like my pre-law program, I absolutely hated. I thought they were really boring. I thought they weren't for me. I took business law. That was extremely boring. I liked the professor, but that was really boring. And I joined a lot of like the pre-law society on our campus. And I hated all the meetings. I hated talking about law. I hated everything that revolved around it. But still in my mind, I had made that a goal to pursue law. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. They choose something that they want to do, and they're kind of like set on that particular goal. And then at least for me, I was a little too afraid to admit that maybe I didn't want to do that. And so I thought law school would be different than my perception of it in college. But again, I still refuse to talk to lawyers. I still refuse to get more information on what exactly I'm getting myself into. So my third year of law school, I took the LSAT, the law school admissions test. I studied for it. I took a course called Test Masters, and I drove after classes. I drove to about like half hour away for the classes. Really good course, learned a lot, and I was scoring really high in my practice test. And long story short, I took it once. I got a score that was a lot lower than my practice test. I took it again, and I did pretty well. I got the score I needed to get into the school, or at least apply for the schools I wanted to apply. I began applying for schools, and I got acceptance letter after acceptance letter after acceptance letter. I got into all the law schools I applied for except for one. And I kind of took it as a sign that, yeah, maybe this is what I'm supposed to do. When you're getting into all these top law schools, and you really shouldn't get into them based off your interest, based off your my GPA was pretty good. But the GPA to get into these schools, the LSAT score to get into these schools, I was not like there. My extracurricular activities weren't there, but yet I still got into them. So I took that as a sign that maybe this is my path. I went to Howard. I went to Howard Law School, They offered me a pretty good scholarship, and so I decided to go there. I moved to Washington, D.C. and started attending school. It was fine at first. All of the classes were law school was exactly the way I thought it was going to be like after visiting a lot of these forums online. And the classes were somewhat interesting, probably because I had like this adrenaline rush going of having to score in this top percentile of my class. Because your most important grades are your first semester grades, because that's all of your places you apply to. That's all the information they have when you first apply there, because you don't have your second semester grades yet. So I took all these classes, and some of them were interesting, but as a majority of all the classes, I just did not like. I didn't like learning about the material. I didn't like the professors. I didn't like, the environment was fine, but still I didn't really like the whole competitive mindset of law school. And I won't mention names, but I just, as a very sensitive person, I took things very personally, and the Socratic method wasn't a method that worked for me, and it kind of made me fear going into class. And that's to say, if you don't have very thick skin, then you probably won't do well. But then again, I went through law school straight out of college, and a lot of people who did really well in law school, they took some time off and they went to the workforce and they worked a few years. So I was 23 my first year of law school. This was in 2013. And so I was, it was weird being I had always been one of the older people in my class, and at that time I was one of the younger people in my class. And I had all these ambitions, I wanted to do all these things, and then once I got into the classroom, all the romanticized ideas I had of law kind of faded away. It was a lot of studying, a lot of reading, and a lot of work. And that's just all to say that when you go into higher education, really have a goal. I really have an end goal, because no one's going to enjoy graduate school. No one really enjoys all that studying. But if you could see yourself being an attorney, if that idea brings you happiness, if that idea brings you inspiration, then it's worth it. But for myself, I did really well in my first semester of law school. But even after that first semester, I knew that I did not want to be a lawyer. There are a lot of people who told me, Jared, if you're interested in sports, if you're interested in books, if you're interested in art, why don't you become like an intellectual property attorney? Why don't you go into like sports law, things like that? But the problem is that all law is the same. It's just a different material, different subject matter. And I love research. I hated researching law. I love writing. I hate legal writing. And so it was this weird, bizarre thing that happened with me, because all these sort of things I enjoy doing, and they would say, oh, you would love law school if you enjoy these things. But in reality, it just wasn't for me. And after going to law school, that first semester, I knew that I wanted to get out. But the problem was, because I wasn't smart in college, I wasn't smart in high school during the summer times, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And it really scared me, because I knew I didn't want to be in law school, but I didn't know what else I would be doing. My parents were amazing that they helped me out financially in school. And so I didn't want to be like, I really don't want to do this anymore, but I don't really know what I want to do, right? And so I stayed, and my second year of law school was really tough, and I went through a really, really dark time, probably the darkest time I've ever been in my life. And when you're so depressed and you're so low, you start asking yourself, like, is this really worth it? Like, I'm doing all this hard work to get to a place where I really don't want to be at. And so I think the main message I want to share in this video is to do your research and be really informed of whatever career that you think you may want to pursue. Talk to people, do informational interviews. I did a lot of those during law school, and I found out I really found out I really did not want to do anything in law. But conduct informational interviews and start as early as possible. If you're still in college, get information. Don't be afraid to say that you want to change your major or you want to do these other things, because at the end of the day, you're the one who has to wake up and do the work. You're the one who has to have that life and no one else. Your friends don't, your parents don't, your siblings don't. And, I had that, my parents and friends were really supportive, but I still had that pressure, so to speak. It wasn't a lot, but I still had that pressure of, you're already doing this, why don't you do this? Or what are you going to do? It's like there's this marker of success that everyone has to meet in order to be happy. But really, happiness can be found at any point on that scale. It's what you find that brings you happiness, what brings you joy. And if it's not bringing you joy, then don't do it. There's no one who's forcing you to do it. And it's better to find out sooner rather than later, like myself, who is still trying to find their way in life. I finally found what it is I'm passionate about, but still at the same time, it's like I wish I would have found that a lot sooner. And another reason why I wanted to make this video was because when I was looking up whether or not I should go to law school or not, a lot of the videos were just like, law school is hard, think about law school, think about the debt, think about the money, all these things. And none of them really talks about a real deeper thing, right? No one really talked about, your passions, your happiness, what brings your spirit, what brings your soul alive in this life. And if it is helping people in legal situations that brings you the most fulfillment in life, then it doesn't matter how much debt you're in. It doesn't matter how many hours you have to spend studying. That's your calling in life, and that's what you should do. But if you were like me and you were pursuing something, one, because people told you that you may be good at it, and second, that you wanted this, you were pursuing status. You wanted something that allowed you to say that I accomplished this, and you wanted people to look at you in a certain way. Whereas you weren't really fulfilled in that life, in that particular job or career or status or whatever. So do something, pursue stuff that makes you feel fulfilled, and do something that, regardless of what people think about you, regardless of the paycheck, regardless of whatever it is that you may accomplish in the material sense, if it makes you feel alive and makes you feel fulfilled, then that's what you should do. But be informed. So hopefully this video wasn't too long. Hopefully it was somewhat informative. And I will talk to you guys next time. Much love.